produit suffisamment de quoi nous nourrir. Nous pouvons dépasser même notre production, malheureusement. Par manque d'organisation, nous sommes encore obligés de tendre la main pour demander des aides alimentaires. Ces aides alimentaires qui nous bloquent, qui nous inspirent, qui installent dans nos esprits cette habitude, ces réflexes de mendiants, d'assister. Nous devons mettre de côté ces aides par notre grande production. Il faut réussir à produire plus. Produire plus. Produire plus parce que il est normal que celui qui vous donne à manger vous dicte également.
Sankara actually grew up in what many would say was a relatively privileged family, in that his father was a functionary in the colonial regime. His family actually wanted him to go to a seminary, wanted him to become a priest, but he decided to go to sign up into the military because that was one of the few national-oriented organizations. And when he was in the military, that's when he actually met with a professor who was a civilian teaching in the schools, and started giving him more like a personal tutorial into history, into the history of imperialism, into the Chinese Revolution, into the colonial history and neo-colonialism. So that really elevated his consciousness. And then he had another opportunity to be trained in Madagascar. And over there, he actually also learned about agrarian reform and land reform and agriculture and how to produce crops efficiently. Blaise Campari was a very good organizer. And in fact, it was Blaise Campari who helped organize and hatch the coup. But he realized that Sankara was tremendously charismatic and just knew a lot more than he did when it came to politics. And that's why Sankara became president and Blaise Campari became his number two.
First of all, he changed the name from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, meant land of the righteous people, or the upright people, or the incorruptible people.
West Africa, it's very semi-arid because of desertification, rapid desertification, and it was totally dependent on food from France and other countries. And that was one of the things that actually really motivated him.
Il y en a qui demandent mais où se trouve l'impérialisme. L'impérialisme, regardez dans vos assiettes, quand vous mangez, les grains de riz, de maïs, de mil importés, c'est ça l'impérialisme, n'allez pas plus loin.
And his number one priority, I think, was food independence, food self-sufficiency. If you can't grow your own food, you are totally not only in a neo-colonial relationship, but you are in fact in a colonial relationship.
Within 3 years, the country became food sufficient. And he went to some of the urban areas that had these ramshackle buildings. And he said, why are you living in these kind of, when you can actually make solid buildings that also look good? And nobody had told people that this is what you should do. They did that. The country built its first rail line that was domestically built with domestic resources without getting a loan for it because everybody rolled up their sleeves, including he himself.
For the first time, Burkinabe, as the people are called, the people of Burkina Faso, plant 10 million trees. And people start understanding that they can actually fight and reverse their condition.
Ce qui veut dire que nous devons donner à chaque femme un emploi. Nous devons donner à chaque femme le moyen de gagner honnêtement et dignement sa vie.
He empowered women, for example. He didn't give them just token jobs. He actually gave them real jobs like officials in the government, ministers in the government, recruited them in the military, had them trained and joined the army as weapons. That had never been seen before. On Women's Day, he said the men should go out and shop today so they understand, how women have been able to keep them alive with the little money that they provide to them.
Quand les filles sont en grossesse ou des choses comme ça, on les renvoie, n'est-ce pas? On les exclut. Mais on ne cherche même pas à savoir si le partenaire avec lequel elle a eu la grossesse là ne se trouve pas par hasard dans la classe.
The broad umbrella is French imperialism.
France controls most of the former colonies in West Africa by controlling the economies.
The currencies of most of those former French colonies are pegged to the French franc.
France would then invest their funds on their behalf. If things go wrong, too bad.
And obviously, when they saw that Sankara was presenting a threat to this, they made the determination to eliminate him. France also has its actors on the African continent, such as, for example, the president of the Ivory Coast, Félix Houphouët-Boigny, who was actually like a regional representative of French interests. And Houphouët-Boigny had a very close relationship with Blaise Compaoré. Thomas Sankara knew that he was in a very perilous position. Sankara, when he paid a visit to France, one of the questions he was getting from French journalists was that why did he actually dare to pay a visit to the Soviet Union?
Et ailleurs aussi. Je n'ai pas seulement été dans ces pays-là, parce que nous entretenons d'excellentes relations avec ces pays, avec les dirigeants de ces pays. Nous avons des projets qui nous paraissent extrêmement importants pour notre développement. Nous recherchons des partenaires. Si un pays plus proche peut nous éviter un long déplacement jusqu'à Moscou, nous ne voyons absolument aucun inconvénient.
What became his death warrant was when he attended the 1987 Organization of African Unity meeting in Addis Ababa, in Ethiopia.
Qui ici ne souhaite pas que la dette soit purement et simplement effacée? Celui qui ne le souhaite pas, il peut sortir, prendre son avion et aller tout de suite à la Banque mondiale payer. Tous nous souhaitons.
He said, listen, we cannot develop our economy so long as we have this huge debt burden above us. We need to do something about this. We need to have these debts canceled, but I can't do it alone. If I do it alone, I will not be here attending the next conference. And lo and behold, it turned out to be true.
Si le Burkina Faso tout seul refuse de payer la dette, je ne serai pas là à la prochaine conférence. Par contre, avec le soutien de tous, dont j'ai besoin.
And you can see the African leaders sort of nodding and agreeing. They knew he was speaking truth to power, but none of them were willing to act on it and join him in taking mass collective action.
That was July 1987. October, he was dead, 1987. And at that time, Houphouët-Boigny was very close to France, was given the dirty job to convince Blaise to get rid of Sankara, because the example that Sankara was setting was spreading in West Africa, was spreading throughout the African continent.
Sankara was shot viciously, I think as many as maybe 12 times, a bullet riddle, with about maybe a dozen of his colleagues that had been in a meeting. And he had been warned. He had been warned several times before by his own intelligence services that Campari is plotting to get rid of you. The best thing is for you to get rid of him first. That's not his nature. If that's what Campari decides to do, then so be it. He has the support of the masses. So he was killed and the body was buried secretly in an unmarked grave. And then, of course, Campari had the press conference saying he found out that Sankara was planning to get rid of him, and that's why people that were loyal to him in the military decided to get rid of Sankara, which was completely out of the foul, of course. And then he was in power until 2014. He had 4 phony elections. And then in 2014, when he wanted to amend the Constitution, by that time, there was actually a Constitution that had a presidential term limits, I believe, of 2 terms. And he had served out the second term. When he tried to do that, then he found out that people had reached their limit. And the youth, young people, they stormed the parliamentary building and they burned down the parliament. And that's when the army that was sustaining him realized that they had a choice. Are they going to continue maintaining this dictator, or will they side with the masses? Campari came out and saying he was going to form a transitional government and then he would leave at the end of the 1-year transition. But people would not have it. They started marching toward his mansion, and that's when he decided to get out of town in a hurry. And the interesting thing is, many of the young folks that came out to the streets and drove Campari away, many were teenagers. They were not born when Sankara was killed, but many of them were wearing Thomas Sankara T-shirts. So obviously his legacy is well alive in Burkina Faso.
Je me retrouve un peu comme un cycliste qui grimpe une pente raide, qui a à gauche, à droite des précipices. Il est obligé de pédaler, de continuer de pédaler, sinon il tombe. Alors pour rester moi-même et pour me sentir moi-même, je suis obligé de continuer dans cette lancée-là.
Vous vous sentez isolé en Afrique?
Mal compris en tout cas.
Mal compris, mal aimé?
Mal aimé. Ouais.